welcome to Campfire Football, Ben Sandhu. Did I pronounce it correctly? Terrific. You are the co-founder of Ida Sports, along with Laura Youngson.
At that time, I mean, Laura, my co-founder, and it's funny having sort of worked with her since. One thing you learn about Laura and everyone that knows her, she's quietly determined. And so the way she tells the story is that, this idea came to her to make a bit of noise, to draw attention to some of the issues for women and girls in soccer. It was just sitting on the couch one day lamenting the fact that these issues sort of exist, and decided I'm going to go climb a mountain and set a Guinness World Record and get a whole bunch of attention for it. So that's what she did. It's pretty well documented now. There's a TED talk about it and all the issues that they faced. I didn't make it to that first Kilimanjaro trip, but Laura and I met each other maybe a couple of months after that. And we started playing indoor soccer together. And she was telling me about this trip and these athletes from around the world. She'd just come back, she'd met and come back from all these stories. And I just thought, well, this is a woman I need to spend more time with, first of all. And she was telling me about this idea that she had for a startup when she was on the trip. Like, she's always had to wear kids' cleats when she plays. When she thought it was just her, and then she started talking to all these women from around the world, and she found out that no, she's not alone, and that women all over the world have been wearing kids' cleats or men's cleats. So when Laura's telling me about this idea, I was just like, this is the idea I've been waiting for, I think. We jumped in January of 2018 was when we had this coffee, and I was like, right, I'm in. I don't know anything about footwear, but I'm here to help. And it was exactly 2 years later, in January of last year, that we were looking at the first production run of our cleat. The number one question we get asked is like, what's to stop Nike or Adidas from crushing you and your dreams? But the more we've dug into it, the more we've just sort of uncovered these huge systemic barriers in design. We've collected so many horror stories along the way about how athletes have been treated by bigger, sponsors, and so it just made us all the more determined that, if we live in a world that's designed for men and boys, well, let's do something to change that ourselves. And the worst case scenario is maybe one of the bigger guys comes and crushes us. But if they do, they need to make something pretty good. And that's a win, right, for women's sport. If there's, female specific cleats everywhere, that's the dream. But the bit that feels really good, honestly, is just the way the players have reacted to it. The thing keeping me up after those, when I'm looking at our first production run, was like, how are players going to react to this? Because, we've talked to physical therapists and podiatrists and coaches and the player, so many of the players themselves, to understand what's wrong. Can we deliver something that actually, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but does it really capture the essence of what we're trying to do here? We had a parent the other day say, my daughter just moves differently in your shoes. And so when you hear that, you go, well, that makes it worth it. To hear, we had a player message me the other day as well that said, I've had an injury-free pre-season. That's never happened to me in my career. And she's like, I'm convinced it's the shoes, So we obviously can't attribute that kind of, we can't be going around saying that our shoes will reduce injury, but we've seen from a biomechanics perspective that the torque that goes through our shoes is less. And players are telling us they just feel really comfortable and they feel like they're tailor-made, and all that stuff just feels amazing to see it out there, and gives us a really strong evidence base on which to build. What I can say is that is top of mind for us, is, both our conversations with clinicians and in terms of what we want to be able to say 5 years in the future. So if you look at the process through which we designed this, it was just talking to hundreds of players, coaches, physical therapists, and saying, tell us what comes up. Like, tell us about what you see happening in your clinics and what's wrong with the industry, and like, you know, what frustrates you. And then designing backwards from there. So, you know, it's anecdotal at scale, but like the plan for the future is, how do you build the evidence like in a more scientific way? And to be honest, that's the really exciting bit, is we're creating the sports science now with like academic partners around, well, okay, I know that you can't clinically say that, or you know, but how do we design a study that is more scientific? How do we be more objective? One of the huge sort of moments for us as a company was we created a prototype of the cleat. She went and played 2 matches in them on artificial turf, like the sort of 3G stuff, which can be pretty rough on people anyway. And she woke up the next day and she said, this is weird. This is the first time after a game of soccer that my feet don't hurt. And that's never happened to me in my life. So we were like, well, there's something to this. We don't want to get too sort of like worked up into what the competition's doing, or, you know, the thing that I think that we've changed, which I think is really resonating, is like, for female players, you are not an afterthought to us. You are our sole focus. And like, you know, we're a young company. We've grown a lot in spite of all the challenges of this crazy sort of last 18 months. And, you know, weren't expecting a global shutdown of sport in the business plan, I can tell you.
Just to highlight the shoes, because there's the Spirit, which is the indoor, and then there's the Classica, right, which is the outdoor. I read in your bios, so you're an ex-cricketer. You played semi-professional cricket, and you and Laura both studied entrepreneurship in university. She did physics. So how does this collate into shoes and apparel, really? Because those are interesting skill sets. What do you guys really bring?
The upside of a physics degree, and there is plenty, is she's got a very analytical mind. And so she, you know, you look at the first prototype that we did, Laura literally baked the outsole in her kitchen. For myself, I did an arts degree, so like, you know, English and history, and I think, you know, I just love getting out there and talking to the players, and understanding their needs, and so it's a nice sort of combo. I think the thing that we both do quite well is ask for help. Like I look around often at the team that we've got now, and you know, experts in footwear, and you know, some really amazing clinicians that have just bought into what we're doing, and that know far more about this than what we do.
Doing what you're doing, it's you're not cobblers, right? You're not a son and daughter of a cobbler. This is not baked into your DNA. This is not baked into your life history. So what you are doing, you are stepping into a new area and taking the amalgam of skills you have, putting them together and creating something brand new.
You're absolutely spot on in that. Not coming from a footwear background, I think, was a real advantage for us, because we would question everything. And sometimes, you know, we might look silly because we're asking a question so basic, you know, of a manufacturer or of a cobbler, say. But it allows you to truly get to grips with, okay, I have no preconceived ideas about how this world operates. So I'm just going to question everything and then try and view where do I think the innovation can happen as a result of that.
For you, this is big, because in a couple of years, there's the World Cup coming to your backyard. In what way do you want to throw the women's football party, right? And how do you want to be a part of that as Ida in your own country?
It's interesting too, because if you look at our logo, we call it the Ida wave. It's kind of got the mountain to represent that first, you know, the Guinness World Record, where we've come from. And we talked a lot about that idea of a wave of change that we're seeing happening in women's football. So that's literally built into every shoe, right? Is to keep us thinking about that and how we do want to be a part of this. And you're absolutely right. I see all over the world now, like so many smart people that believe in what needs to happen and are working actively towards that. And I'm so glad you mentioned Dina. She's a dear friend of ours. Sent me a text the other day because she just got her indoor shoes from us, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm in love with them," which is like such a big deal to me to get that kind of message. But yeah, in terms of like how we want to sort of be a part of it and showcase it, I think that tournament represents a huge opportunity to raise the profile of women's football. You know, Australia is a great place to have a tournament like this. I really hope, and I'm sure we will, put on a show and, you know, just have the sorts of activations that made, you know, France special, but hopefully we can do a little bit better as well.
There is actually something I noticed on your site. I have no idea what this means, and I would love for you to explain it to me. What's shrink it, pink it?
So yeah, that phrase just kept coming up as we were researching the shoe. Like, one of the truly shocking things, and we talk about it a lot, that it was such an open secret in the footwear industry that we don't design for women, that the industry had a nice phrase for it, which is they take men's shoes and they shrink it and pink it. And if the expectation is all we need to do is make something pink, that is so jarring with like the research that we did. So as an example, we ran this like big survey, and we had an additional comments box, you know, that was like, we didn't expect anybody to fill it out, but hey, if you've got anything else you want to say, go ahead. About like almost 30%, I think, of people went out of their way to say, please don't make this pink. You know, like, whatever you do, don't make it pink. Now, I personally don't have a problem with pink, but I just found that very interesting that for a lot of female players, they were just sick and tired of this. Like, it's. I think about what pink represents. You know, like, oh yeah, like, you're a girl, so you must love pink, and lots of female footballers don't. So noted. Hence why our first shoe was black, because there was a lot of love for black. So, and there's also a lot of love for white. So that's on the way.
I wanted to ask for two pieces for advice for two groups of people. The first one is other entrepreneurs who would like to be involved in things that are more for women, more designed for girls, more designed especially for not necessarily just sporting equipment, but things that actually help real life issues, your body and your health and everything.
I think my advice, actually counterintuitively, my first piece of advice would be, don't quit your day job until you need to. That would be my first piece of advice. But the second thing would just be, yeah, get curious, and like, you know, if there's a space that really interests you, just go be around and ask lots of dumb questions and just get interested in that. Because it's amazing how just we've seen, and from what I've seen personally, both inside and outside of IDA, just doing that, being curious, asking questions, the opportunities kind of present themselves from there. So I would just find people that, you know, that you find inspiring, hang around them, ask questions. Like, they will give you the time of day. We wouldn't be where we are, and, you know, we do have a long way to go, but we genuinely wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for the generosity of people far more qualified to talk about this stuff.
Well, the second one is us, right? We're males who are allies to the cause. I think that there's a huge space for, you know, people like us to be involved. I think a lot of people also don't know what the best way to approach getting involved in sort of a woman's issue is. And you're the co-founder, as a male, you're a co-founder of this company, and not many people would assume that you would be the person in that position, and that maybe Laura would have said, yes, you're the person I want along for this ride or something. So what advice do you have for guys out there that are on board and also want to help?
What I've seen that's really helpful, I think, is just the ability to really listen, right? Like, and not make assumptions about somebody's experience. You know, I often find people are really scared to say the wrong thing or you know, that they're going to get something wrong and then they disengage. And I think that's not helpful either. I think what's important is to just, often as men, we can really react quite defensively and say, well, I didn't mean like that. So, the problem doesn't exist or whatever. I think for me, the most important thing is just really asking questions, being open and listening to the answers, and then and reflecting on that. Like, if that person's having that experience, well, what does that mean for me? How could I, for example, be more inclusive in the way I conduct meetings or something? Like, if I've heard from a number of my female colleagues that they feel a bit intimidated to speak up because of the dynamics of a group, then maybe what I can do as somebody that has more license to talk in those spaces is to direct some attention that way and say, hey, Steph, what do you think about this? Because we'd love to hear from you. Like, these are small things, but really important. I think they add up. What privileges do I hold as a person? How can I make it a bit other for people that maybe don't share those privileges? And just do the best you can. You're not always going to get it right, but it's better to be in the game trying to make the change than disengaging altogether because you're too scared to saying the wrong thing.
Say whatever you want about IDA Sports. Give yourself a minute or two to just say whatever you feel about it. Yeah,
it's like to those listening, it'd be great. Obviously, we exist at idasports.com. Just check out, read a bit about our story if you want to know more. You can find us at Instagram as well, at IDA Sports on Instagram. Really, I hope for those that have listened to this that they've really understood the authenticity of what we're trying to do, and they hopefully respect and want to support that. You can also get in touch with us to support at idasports.co. And really all I'd say about IDA, we've spent, we're 3.5 years in now. We've got a cleat that's available right now. We're working on, the indoor shoes have become available as well recently. But just help us, take us to the next stage. Like, we love talking to players. We love hearing from players. We love sharing, amazing stories from women's soccer. So if you have any of those and you want us to shout about them, that's what we're here for. And otherwise, if there's stuff you think we should be doing, get in touch. We love to listen and hear things. So
thank you so much for giving me the time to be able to hear all this. And I think being able to talk to anyone from this Equal Playing Field initiative, I think anyone who's interested, this is a really good place to go and look into where there's a whole lot of people making stuff happen. It's like an oasis of new ideas, basically.
Yeah, I think that group really, the sorts of women that I've met and men that have been a part of that initiative in particular, it's phenomenal what they're doing. Maggie Murphy is a name that comes to mind, general manager of the Lewis Football Club, that they pay their men and women equally, like they're real leaders in their space. So if you're interested in equality in football, Equal Playing Field Initiative is an inclusive, amazing group of people that just are about what it seems like we're about here. So it's such a pleasure to have been a part of the podcast and to hear the way you're telling stories. It means a lot. So thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
You're a busy man right now, starting a company. It's a baby, so you got to go take care of it and make sure it turns into a big person that changes the world, basically.